The brutal truth about relationships with avoidant partners is that your generous heart, emotional availability, and willingness to give endlessly are not virtues in their eyes, they're weaknesses to be exploited. Every time you offer more of yourself to compensate for their emotional limitations, you're training them to value you less while expecting more. The counterintuitive reality is that avoidants are psychologically programmed to want most what they cannot easily access, which means the more you withhold from them, the more desperately they desire what you're no longer freely giving. The psychology of overgiving, why your generosity backfires. Your instinct to give more when someone gives less stems from a deeply ingrained belief that love should be unconditional and that patient, persistent caring will eventually break through emotional barriers and inspire reciprocal affection. This generous approach works beautifully with emotionally healthy partners who appreciate and reciprocate your investment. But with avoidance, it creates the opposite effect by triggering their psychological systems that equate easy availability with low value. Avoidants operate on scarcity psychology, where anything freely given must be worthless, while anything difficult to obtain holds tremendous value. When you consistently provide emotional support, physical affection, and relationship investment without requiring equivalent return, you're essentially teaching them that your love is cheap and abundant rather than precious and valuable. Your overgiving also eliminates the psychological tension that avoidants need to maintain interest and investment in relationships. They're unconsciously attracted to challenge, uncertainty, and the need to work for emotional rewards. When you provide everything they want without requiring effort or reciprocal investment, you remove the very dynamics that keep them psychologically engaged. The abundance you create through overgiving allows them to take your presence for granted while focusing their attention on other pursuits, people, or interests that provide the challenge and uncertainty their psychology craves. They begin to see you as a reliable resource they can access whenever convenient rather than a valuable partner whose attention must be earned and maintained. Your emotional labor becomes invisible when you provide it consistently without acknowledgement or appreciation. Avoidants learn to expect your support, understanding, and accommodation as baseline rather than recognizing these as generous gifts that deserve gratitude and reciprocation. They literally cannot see the value of what you provide because it's always available. The overgiving pattern also prevents them from experiencing the natural consequences of their emotional limitations. When you consistently fill the gaps their avoidance creates, they never have to confront how their behavior affects relationships or develop better emotional skills. Your compensation for their deficits enables their continued emotional immaturity. Most destructively, your overgiving often comes at the expense of your own needs, creating an unsustainable dynamic where you gradually deplete your emotional resources while they remain psychologically comfortable and unchanged. This sacrifice teaches them that your well-being is less important than their comfort, establishing a hierarchy that becomes increasingly difficult to reverse. The irony is that the very qualities that make you an exceptional partner, generosity, empathy, emotional intelligence, and commitment, become liabilities when directed towards someone who interprets these qualities as evidence of your lower value rather than reasons to treasure and reciprocate your love. The scarcity principle: how withholding creates desire. The psychological principle that governs avoidant attraction is fundamentally based on scarcity and the human tendency to want most what appears to be moving away or becoming unavailable. This principle operates unconsciously but powerfully, creating desire through perceived loss rather than satisfaction through abundant provision. When you dramatically reduce your emotional availability, physical affection, and relationship investment, you trigger their competitive psychology and force them to confront the possibility of losing access to resources they've taken for granted. This potential loss activates their attachment system in ways that consistent availability never could, because their brains are wired to respond to threat and challenge rather than security and abundance. The scarcity you create by withholding doesn't just make them want more, it fundamentally changes how they perceive the value of what you offer. Attention that was previously ignored becomes precious when it's rare. Affection that was taken for granted becomes desperately desired when it's withdrawn. Time that was assumed to be unlimited becomes valuable when it's carefully rationed. Your strategic withholding also forces them to work for your attention and investment in ways they'd never had to before, creating the psychological challenge their system requires to maintain interest. Instead of receiving your love automatically, they must now earn it through improved behavior, greater effort, and actual consideration of your needs and feelings. The competitive aspect of scarcity psychology becomes activated when they realize they're no longer the automatic recipient of your emotional investment and that your attention might be redirected toward people who can appreciate and reciprocate it properly. This competition for resources they assumed were permanently theirs triggers possessive responses and increased effort. Scarcity also creates psychological urgency that abundance never generates. When your love was freely available, they could access it whenever convenient, without concern about timing or opportunity cost. When you create scarcity, they must consider whether they might miss their chance to receive your attention if they don't act quickly or appropriately. The withdrawal of your emotional labor forces them to experience the actual effort required to maintain relationships and manage their own emotional needs without your constant support and accommodation. They begin to understand how much work you are doing to maintain the relationship's emotional health and functionality. Most importantly, scarcity forces them to make conscious choices about whether they want access to what you offer rather than passively receiving your investment without consideration. This choice-making process often reveals to them how much they actually value your presence and contribution to their life. What you're giving away that they don't deserve. The devastating truth is that you're probably giving precious parts of yourself to someone who hasn't earned access to your emotional generosity, physical affection, or life energy. Recognizing what you're freely giving to someone incapable of reciprocating helps you understand why you must drastically reduce your investment to protect your own worth. Your emotional availability and empathetic responses to their moods, problems, and life challenges represent valuable emotional labor that they consume without appreciation or reciprocal support. Every time you comfort them during stress, listen to their problems, or provide emotional guidance, you're offering gifts that healthy partners would treasure and reciprocate. The physical affection you provide, touches, kisses, sexual intimacy, and casual physical connection, represents your body's gift of pleasure and comfort that they receive without having to provide the emotional presence and partnership that should accompany physical intimacy. They're accessing your physical generosity while remaining emotionally unavailable. Your time and attention are finite resources that you're spending on someone who doesn't prioritize your presence or make effort to create meaningful experiences together. Every minute you invest in someone who doesn't value your time is a minute stolen from yourself, your other relationships, or pursuits that could bring genuine fulfillment. The emotional regulation you provide by managing their discomfort with feelings, smoothing over their social awkwardness, or accommodating their emotional limitations represents sophisticated emotional skills that they're benefiting from without developing themselves. You're essentially doing their emotional work for them while they remain emotionally stunted. Your forgiveness and understanding of their limitations, while admirable in healthy relationships, becomes enabling when directed towards someone who uses your tolerance as permission to avoid growth and change. They learn that they can continue harmful patterns because you'll always provide understanding and accommodation. The future planning and relationship vision you invest in someone who can't commit to shared goals represents your hopes and dreams being wasted on someone incapable of building the partnership you desire. Your emotional investment in possibilities they'll never actualize is energy stolen from creating actual fulfillment. Your loyalty and commitment to someone who remains uncommitted to you represents a fundamental imbalance where you're providing relationship security while receiving uncertainty and emotional instability in return. This one-sided commitment enables their continued emotional unavailability. Most significantly, your love itself, the precious gift of your emotional investment, care, and devotion, is being given to someone who neither appreciates its value nor possesses the emotional capacity to reciprocate it meaningfully. You're essentially casting pearls before swine. The strategic withdrawal. How to give less effectively. Reducing what you give to an avoidant partner requires strategic thinking and emotional discipline, because your natural impulse will be to resume overgiving when you see them respond positively to scarcity. The withdrawal must be systematic, sustained, and motivated by genuine recognition that they don't deserve unlimited access to your emotional generosity. Emotional availability should be the first area of strategic reduction. Stop being the person who listens to their problems, provides comfort during their stress, or offers emotional guidance when they're struggling. Redirect this emotional energy toward people who reciprocate your investment and appreciate your empathetic presence. Physical affection reduction involves dramatically decreasing the touches, kisses, and sexual intimacy you initiate while requiring them to put significantly more effort into earning physical connection. Your body becomes a privilege they must earn through emotional presence and genuine partnership rather than a resource they can access while remaining emotionally distant. Time allocation requires ruthless prioritization of your own interests, goals, and relationships over their convenience and desires. Stop rearranging your schedule to accommodate their availability and instead require them to work around your commitments if they want time with you. Communication frequency should decrease dramatically as you stop being the person who initiates conversations, checks in on their well-being, or maintains the relationship's emotional connection through constant contact. Let them experience what the relationship feels like when they must do the work of maintaining connection. Problem-solving assistance should be withdrawn as you stop helping them navigate life challenges, offering advice, or serving as their emotional consultant. They need to experience the full weight of managing their own life without your constant support and guidance. Future planning participation should be reduced to only commitments they've earned through consistent behavior rather than hypothetical scenarios or hopes for their potential growth. Stop investing emotional energy in possibilities they haven't demonstrated capacity to create. Forgiveness and understanding should become earned privileges rather than automatic responses to their mistakes or limitations. They need to experience natural consequences for their behavior rather than your immediate accommodation and rationalization of their patterns. Social and professional support should be minimized. As you stop being their advocate, social facilitator, or career supporter, unless they're providing equivalent investment in your goals and aspirations. Your network and resources become available only through reciprocal support. The key to effective withdrawal is maintaining consistency over extended periods rather than temporary reduction, followed by resumed overgiving when they show slight improvement. They must learn that your previous level of investment is no longer available regardless of their response. Their predictable response to your strategic withholding. When you systematically reduce what you give to an avoidant partner, their response typically follows predictable stages that reveal both their previous taking of you for granted and their genuine capacity for effort when motivated by potential loss. Understanding these responses helps you maintain your boundaries while recognizing their behavior changes as reactions to scarcity rather than authentic transformation. Initial confusion often characterizes their first response as they notice changes in your behavior, but haven't yet grasped the significance or permanence of your withdrawal. They may assume you're temporarily upset, stressed by other factors, or going through a mood that will pass with time and patience on their part. Testing behaviors emerge as they attempt to restore the previous dynamic through increased attention, temporary emotional availability, or strategic gestures designed to regain your investment without having to sustain new effort levels. These tests are designed to see if your withdrawal is serious or if you can be easily manipulated back into overgiving. Increased pursuit often follows when they realize your withdrawal is sustained and intentional rather than temporary emotional fluctuation. They may suddenly become more communicative, physically affectionate, or emotionally available as they attempt to restore access to your previous level of investment. Competitive response triggers when they recognize that your reduced investment might be redirected toward other people who can appreciate what you offer. The possibility that someone else might gain access to your time, attention, and affection often motivates unprecedented effort to regain their position as your primary emotional focus. Bargaining behaviors emerge as they attempt to negotiate specific exchanges, offering minimal increases in their emotional availability in exchange for restoration of your previous overgiving patterns. They want to provide just enough effort to restore your investment without having to sustain significant changes long term. Emotional manipulation may escalate as they realize that straightforward effort isn't restoring your previous patterns. This might include guilt tripping about your withdrawal, accusations that you're being distant or cold, or attempts to make you feel responsible for their emotional distress about your changed behavior. Temporary transformation often occurs when other strategies fail and they recognize that sustaining your reduced investment might mean permanently losing access to your emotional resources. During this phase, they may display emotional capacity and relationship skills they've never shown before. Reversion to previous patterns typically follows once they feel confident that they've restored your emotional investment and that you're no longer likely to withdraw again. Their improved behavior often disappears once they feel secure in having regained access to your overgiving patterns. Understanding these predictable responses helps you recognize that their improved behavior during your withdrawal is motivated by fear of loss rather than genuine appreciation for your worth or authentic development of greater emotional capacity. The power dynamics. How less giving changes everything. Strategic reduction of your emotional investment fundamentally alters the power dynamics in your relationship with an avoidant partner, shifting you from the position of pursuer to the position of the pursued, while forcing them to experience uncertainty and effort they've never had to navigate before. The power shift occurs because your withdrawal eliminates their sense of control over your emotional availability and forces them to work for access to resources they previously took for granted. Instead of being able to manage your investment through intermittent attention, they must now consistently earn your emotional engagement through improved behavior. Your reduced availability creates psychological urgency they've never experienced in your relationship as they confront the possibility that your attention might be permanently limited or redirected elsewhere. This urgency forces them to make conscious choices about whether they want access to what you offer rather than passively receiving your investment. The role reversal that occurs when you stop overgiving often provides you with first-hand understanding of how much effort you were providing to maintain the relationship's emotional health. Your withdrawal reveals how little they were contributing and how much they were depending on your emotional labor to create connection. Their pursuit of your reduced investment often reveals emotional capacity they claimed not to possess, demonstrating that their limitations were choices rather than unchangeable characteristics. When motivated by potential loss, they often display vulnerability, communication skills, and emotional availability they insisted they couldn't provide. The psychological challenge you create through strategic withholding often activates their problem-solving abilities and competitive instincts in ways that your previous overgiving never could. They begin to see maintaining your interest as a challenge worth their effort rather than an automatic entitlement. Your boundary setting through reduced giving also provides them with clear feedback about what level of effort is required to maintain access to your emotional investment. This clarity often motivates better behavior because they understand the direct correlation between their actions and your availability. The respect they develop for your reduced availability often exceeds any appreciation they showed for your previous overgiving, because scarcity creates value in ways that abundance never could. They begin to recognize your worth precisely because they can no longer take your presence for granted. Most importantly, your strategic withdrawal provides you with accurate information about their genuine capacity for relationship, effort, and emotional investment. Their response to your reduced giving reveals whether they possess the ability to reciprocate appropriately when motivated by potential loss. The long-term strategy, sustainable relationship investment. Creating lasting change in your dynamic with an avoidant partner requires establishing sustainable patterns of investment that protect your emotional well-being while creating conditions where genuine reciprocity can develop. This long-term approach focuses on building equity rather than depleting your resources through overgiving. Reciprocal investment becomes your standard, where you match their level of emotional availability, effort, and commitment, rather than providing more than you receive. This creates sustainable balance and prevents the resentment that builds when you're consistently overgiving while they remain emotionally stingy. Earned privilege systems replace automatic giving by requiring them to demonstrate appreciation and reciprocity before receiving increased access to your time, attention, and emotional resources. Your investment becomes proportional to their demonstrated capacity to value and reciprocate what you offer. Boundary maintenance requires ongoing vigilance to prevent gradual regression into overgiving patterns when they show temporary improvement. Their increased effort during your withdrawal should be sustained over extended periods before you consider increasing your own investment proportionally. Alternative investment becomes crucial as you redirect emotional energy toward people and pursuits that appreciate and reciprocate your generous nature. This redirection not only protects your emotional well-being, but also demonstrates to the avoidant that your energy has multiple potential destinations. Self-advocacy replaces accommodation as you prioritize your own needs and preferences rather than constantly adapting to their limitations and comfort level. They learn that maintaining access to your investment requires consideration of your needs rather than expectation that you'll always accommodate theirs. Value recognition becomes essential as you develop clear understanding of what you bring to relationships and what you deserve in return. This self-awareness prevents you from accepting minimal effort as adequate appreciation for your significant emotional investment. The sustainable approach also requires accepting that some avoidants will never develop the capacity for genuine reciprocity, regardless of how strategically you manage your investment. Your reduced giving serves as both motivation for their growth and protection for your well-being if growth doesn't occur. Most importantly, sustainable investment means prioritizing your own emotional health and happiness over the potential for their transformation. Your well-being cannot depend on their capacity to change or appreciate what you offer. It must be based on your own choices and standards for acceptable treatment. The ultimate goal isn't to manipulate them into loving you properly, but to create conditions where genuine appreciation and reciprocity can develop while protecting yourself from further emotional depletion. Whether this results in improved relationship dynamics or recognition that they're incapable of healthy partnership, the strategic reduction of your giving serves your long-term interests by preserving your emotional resources for connections that can truly value and reciprocate your love. Understanding that you've been giving too much of yourself away to someone who doesn't deserve unlimited access to your emotional generosity is the first step toward reclaiming your power and creating relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided accommodation. The less you give to those who don't appreciate you, the more you have available for people who can truly value what you offer.